Hello and welcome to the Botanical Biohacking Podcast. Today, I have a message that may not be for you. And that's because it isn't for everyone. But if you have been feeling like the tasks before you in life are overwhelming, and you have slipped when it comes to self-care, if you feel tired despite having more time than you used to have, and can't find the motivation for self-care, then this is for you. If you struggle to help others have the will to take care of themselves and make that a priority, then this is also for you. And I want to start with a question, if that's the case. When is it that thriving stopped becoming a priority for you? See, how is it that we lose our innate instinct for self-care? Birds groom themselves. Dogs feel tired and they'll sleep for 14 hours. What is it that causes us to lose this instinct for self-preservation? Did you accept that your current physical level is as good as it gets? Within your own life, how do you set that level for acceptable health? And how is it that you find a happy medium where you're not dying from a sedentary lifestyle, but you're also not an exercise fanatic? See, I'm not talking about impossible ideals, because I see them marketed as well. I was watching a video of a super athlete CEO who says he wakes up at 5 a.m. and drinks coffee and goes on a 10-mile run. His entire existence, according to this video, is centered around himself. He's got a customized meal plan. Everything is about him. And it looks very ideal for fitness. But it's a fantasy that he's selling. See, nobody really lives this way. And being in the world of natural medicine, I run closely enough to these circles to know that much of this is theater. The reality of this Instagram perfect life looks a lot more like taking uppers and steroids from people who have no responsibilities and no dependence and a little bit of narcissistic personality disorder. So this isn't some artificial ideal that I'm speaking of. I'm talking about the intent to make the most of yourself physically out of what you have available, out of the reality of your life. It's where you place your physical, mental, and spiritual health within the reality of your life, not the ideal life, but real imperfect life, complete with events beyond your control. Yes, in the midst of chaos, we can often get so caught into the past and future that we stop seeing ourselves as someone we are responsible for taking care of in the long term. Because sometimes there are moments from the past that may negatively affect your self-care habits in the present. And some of these moments are times we feel proud of. This is one I've got caught in a lot. I can ask yourself if this has happened to you. Reflections on our strength and resiliency can be a source of power and inspiration, but they can also be a source of neglect. See, there are moments of strength that lead to inner voices telling us that we can take the pain. We can push harder than others. And while this may be true, it is not necessarily helpful in the present. It's a fine thing to have tremendous willpower. That's a blessing. That's a gift. But it's also an act of discipline and self-care not to dip into it when it is not necessary. And understanding when it is necessary and when it is not requires an inner quiet to know the wisdom to determine when to turn it on full blast, and when to recover. This is why so many smart and driven and successful people fall or burn out. They tell themselves the story that they can take the pain others can't, until it destroys them. And this is even worse when it's combined with a sense of acceptable health within a group identity. There are other moments from your past that may tell you that people like us don't participate in self-care like that. I treated a young man for back pain several years ago, and he had severe anterior pelvic tilt. His butt just stuck right out. I asked him why he held his posture this way, even when it gave him back pain. He told me something interesting. He said everyone in his family did this. Now I thought, is this a genetic condition? But he was from a very wealthy and powerful family, and he said everybody in his family held themselves this way. Now it turned out that his grandfather had back problems, and yet everybody in his family, especially the men in his family, admired the grandfather so much that they copied his way of movement. They emulated this, causing themselves pain in the process. Now, this sounds silly, but for many families, this looks like alcohol consumption. It looks like lack of sleep. It looks like overwork, and it looks like obesity. This family may have been a little eccentric, but are they any more self-destructive than other families who just think, well, I'm 40. My dad looked like this at 40. I'm 50. I'm 60. All the women in my family carry fat right here. These are stories that we tell ourselves based on a group identity that we use to determine that we're not worth taking care of. We can come to identify an imbalance as a symbol of group identity. There are moments that lead to subconsciously agreeing that for your age, a certain level of fitness is good enough, regardless of what your internal organs, trillions of cells, and commensal microbiota may have to say on the subject. So I would ask you to check in with yourself and stop asking what is normal for someone like you, but rather ask your body itself what it needs and wants. Sometimes your legs want to jump. Sometimes they want to sleep. Checking for internal cues more than group cues, more than the stories you've told yourself in the past, may serve you better. The simple act of checking in with yourself may be one of the most powerful healing forces you have. Have you ever seen or heard someone that's on the edge of death, and suddenly they have a change in spirit and decide to live? Others resign themselves to death and pass on shortly after. We know of these stories of elders who are given a week to live, but hold on until all their children are present so they can say goodbye. There is something about our spirit that can accelerate our will to live and thrive, and the absence of it, which can resign people to a downward spiral. We see this and tell stories about this when it comes to the very elderly. But isn't this true of all of us, in all ages? Have you ever seen a young person give up on themselves? They put themselves in harm's way because they stop prioritizing themselves as a priority. They stop caring about themselves. And you know that this creates pain for many more people than they realize, because they don't actually understand how many people love them or care about them or simply wish them well. When you see the neighbor kid participate in risky activity because he stopped caring about himself, because he stopped having that will to live, it stings you even if you only know him at a casual level. You want to see him out thriving. Well, I have news for you. That's how people think of you. Even if they know you casually, they want to see you thriving because that makes them feel better about life. It gives them permission to thrive as well. And when we lose ourselves, we lose rhythm and balance and stability. We lose internal communication. And we lose touch with the connections in life which make us stronger. It has unexpected power, but it can also be very difficult to put into practice. Around 15 years ago now, I treated a woman with chronic pain from several sources. She had lost the will to heal. She was tired of life, and if you truly listened to her story, you would understand why. I cannot blame her for wanting to give up. And if I were to be living in her shoes, in her past, and in her present state, I can't say I would feel differently. It was bleak and terrible, and I will spare you the details. Because within your own life story, there is more than enough pain for you to understand what it is that she endured and survived. Her present reality and her past were both places you wouldn't want to visit. They followed her through life like demons, repeating words and beliefs in her present that were destroying her as she went through life. Before I could really treat her and even show her that a better life was possible, I needed to help guide her back to herself. And this proved to be a difficult journey. Her inner voice screamed as a child, and she screamed along with it until she learned that screaming wouldn't help. So she started to be silent, and she started to ignore her own internal voice. The internal voice that tells you, I need rest, I need sleep, they're crossing my boundaries, don't let them do that. The inner voice that tells you how to thrive, she stopped listening to this. She ignored the needs of her body, the signals of her body, her intuition. She put her needs last because she thought she was worth less than those talking to her. Have you ever stopped listening to your internal voice because you didn't think anyone would listen? Have you ever felt that it was unheard, both by yourself and others? She did. I have. I'm sure you can understand as well. So the more she smiled and gave ground to others, trying to make a happy, positive life, thinking positive, thinking of sparkly unicorns and angels, and she wanted to just keep her mind focused on that which was positive, in a sense. But the more she did this, the more she felt numb on the inside. But anger was bouncing around inside of her. Physically, this looked like chronic inflammation, elevated cortisol. It was causing spikes in nitric oxide, disintegrating her nerves and breaking down internal communication within the body. She had associated her earlier survival and ability to get through it with being tough and resilient, but ultimately it was not improving her life in the present. In fact, it was slowly taking her apart at a cellular level. So I did acupuncture for her to help regulate that nitric oxide. I gave her herbs to bring down the cortisol. And I alleviated the symptoms and gave her breathing exercises so that she wouldn't need me in the long run. The next appointment, she said that she felt incredible peace and clarity after that appointment. And then she turned on the news, as she always did in the afternoon. And there was a story about terrible violence against children in the Middle East, and she started weeping, and she could feel her stomach just turn to knots. Now, why would she do this? She was finally starting to feel better, right? In her life, she was always trying to focus on the positive. Well, she was always trying to focus on the positive aspects of people who were not nice to her. But because internally she was resonating with pain and suffering, she naturally gravitated towards stories of pain and suffering. Now, why would she do this? It's the same reason we all do. The terror she was borrowing from the Middle East felt normal, not healthy, just the terrible familiarity of pain. She was gravitating toward that which resonated with her internal condition. So I asked her to think about the difference in the feelings that she was having from the treatment to after. And she decided to log off of Facebook for a while, shut off her TV, and use any extra energy she had to work on breathing exercises and to take her herbs. She had wonderful compassion, but was fighting battles that weren't hers to fight. She was powerless to help anybody in the Middle East. She couldn't even work. She couldn't hold down a job because of the condition that she was in. But in her mind, she's trying to be there in the Middle East helping children, but this is only in her mind. It was an escape from herself. And it's a way to ignore herself and her own internal vision, her own internal voice. It was escape from loving herself and paying attention to her own needs. Now, maybe you can relate to this. Have you ever found yourself in battles that weren't yours in order to evade challenges you actually needed to face? I have. She was, and I suspect that you can understand from your own life experience. See, on paper, doctors help patients recover. But the first step is often to break spells or mental states of illusion and return people back to themselves and their willingness to heal in the present. And it's important to use emotions to snap people out of this state. And there are two ways to go about this. One is to nourish and support, and the other is to burst the bubble. Two ways to go about this. It's not going to be the same for any two people. A medicine woman in Mexico just last month told me that nature is a state of implosion and explosion, growth and dissipation. This matches the Chinese idea of emptiness and fullness, tonification and sedation, pumping up the tire or releasing the gas. See, some people need to be nourished and encouraged. However, when people are holding on to parasitic beliefs, nourishing them nourishes the parasite too. Telling somebody who believes that they are strong enough to endure self-punishment. If you tell these people, oh yeah, you're strong, you can do it, keep going, you're actually accelerating their pain and you're driving them toward burnout. Is that medicine or poison? It looks nice. It sounds nice. But in that condition, it is a poison. The doctor would unwillingly and unwittingly become a poisoner, even with the best of intentions. Instead, for those cases, it's imperative to snap them out of it. Sometimes this can involve humor to make them laugh and change their perspective. Sometimes it involves anger. Yeah. See, we're told that you should always be happy and always look on the bright side, and that's very juvenile. Sometimes you need to have a straight talk when people are hurting themselves and they are in a condition where they need to have an illusion broken. The same way you may remove a parasite using herbs that are not that comfortable to take. Sometimes that needs to happen. Now, a lot of times, nourishment needs to happen first. And it's a delicate balance to know which is the case, not just with patients, but with ourselves as well. So as we go through this, ask yourself whether you need more nourishment or whether you need to take a hard look at yourself and cut away some ideas that are no longer serving you. There's implosion and explosion. There's adding and releasing. And it's not good to always release, and it's not good to always add. You need to find that balance for yourself. And many times, it's by not doing anything whatsoever and simply giving a patient or yourself time and space and demonstrating that serenity, either to yourself or another person, by controlling your own breathing and heart rate so that they can subconsciously find themselves in a calmer space. It's in giving this time and space to heal that the heart returns to its original nature. Around 2,000 years ago, there was a book written called the Huainanzi, a book of wisdom written and compiled for Prince Liu An of Huainan, a book combining Taoist, Confucian, and legalist wisdom. And in it, there's a line that stood out to me recently. It says, 神性之平. The spirit emotions aspire toward balance. If you leave yourself alone, your heart tends to heal. Now, again, that sounds easy, but the woman I was treating, was she leaving herself alone? No, she was carrying all kinds of messages from her past. She was bringing all kinds of pain from the Middle East into her eyes, jacking up her cortisol levels. She was not leaving herself alone. And the journey back to herself was a journey of learning to leave herself alone. And when you do this, the fire burns out. The pond becomes still. Sometimes leaving ourselves alone and coming to a space of inner tranquility requires shutting out irritating input. We need a calm lake to see through the water. Constantly irritating the lake will only obscure the inner vision. This means that given time and space, we can come to a space of stillness and begin healing. The Huainanzi also describes this as causing the 100 junctions of the body to loosen and become tranquil. This could also be translated as the 100 knots of the body, or the 100 joints or turns of the body. Everywhere that blood can get kinked, where joints can crack and ache, all of those relax and become slack when the spirit is tranquil. Now, does mental tension cause physical tension? We know that it does. Does physical tension contribute to mental tension? We know that it does. These are linked. When we find that stretching and exercise and massage aren't helping the way that they should, it's important to consider alleviating mental tension by simply not adding to it, by embracing silence and not micromanaging the ripples in the pond. Because if you put your hand in the pond to try to smooth out those ripples, you create more ripples. It's rather a process of letting them arrange themselves to a place of stillness where you can sit softly, see clearly, and hear. In the Su Wen, an ancient book on Chinese medicine, one of the most revered books on Chinese medicine, it says, observe and guard the spirit internally. Where can disease emanate from? This shows that the most important aspect of health is in the mind itself. It may feel normal to be in a state of physical or mental pain, or simply let yourself go. In fact, doing so may be what you're used to. But it's also like saying that the world is dark because you have so many memories of the night. Life is change. And when you feel stuck in the moment of pain and the anticipation for future pain and suffering is there, people believe that that is what the future will bring, that it doesn't necessarily get better. And that's when you start to let yourself go. Like with COVID, you're not anticipating that anybody's not going to see you in your sweatpants. So the sweatpants stay on for 1 week and 2 weeks. And then, hey, why shower? And this leads to poor habits, poor self-care. And it's not necessarily what's best for you. Now, this can range, obviously, from simply brushing our teeth and flossing more, taking better care of ourselves emotionally. And it can also range to the cycles we put ourselves in life. And metaphorically, we may see this as a demon or a devil that's been chasing us, leading us away from our best life and our best interests. This woman I was treating, I'll call her Barbara, she had what she described as a demon following her through life. And it was clear that the beliefs around herself and around her boundaries had been compromised. So I don't think that there was an external demon. I think it was her being cruel to herself. So one person after another took advantage of her. But really, it was her refusing to acknowledge the pain in the present and adapt to it for whatever reasons in the past. Now, this has an upside. Once she started to check in on herself, once she started to take care of herself, within 3 months, she was out of pain. Within 9 months, she was getting strong enough that unless there was a sudden weather change or unless she really overdid exercise, she really didn't have much pain that way. She started volunteering. She went back to her church and she started teaching them Qigong exercises I had taught her to a group of women who also had chronic pain, and she helped them to get out of pain. She restructured her life, and it was an alchemical process that she went through. But there were no real demons and there was no real magic. But it was a spell that she was under. It was a mental state that needed to change. And she went from never saying no to being able to say, I won't be able to do that on Thursday because I'm just running out of energy. She went to a state where she was protecting herself. And this is all of us to a degree. When we don't treasure ourselves, we give too much of ourselves and make thieves even of well-meaning people. And we also open the door for vicious beasts and four-legged humans to come and tear at our clothing. It has a physical and emotional weight on the heart. Not only emotions, but the variability of our heart rate, our natural rhythms and cycles, the amount and rhythm by which our cells are nourished by that blood. It influences our sleep and the ability to heal and restore ourselves. It's about coming out of fatigue and combat fatigue and into a state of restoration. So how do we come back in step with our heart? In many cases, it's tuning into this inner voice that we're scared of. Because it's an inner voice that when we really tune into it, is often crying for change so that we can adapt to reality, true reality in the present, not the myth about reality that we narrate for ourselves. And when we ignore this for a while, those death instincts come up, especially as people get near burnout. They have been ignoring themselves for too long. And you get this kind of death instinct. And if and when that comes, just remember that autumn isn't death. Hibernation isn't death. It's only a rest. It's an important part of the cycle, and it's a symbol that it is time to restore yourself. When you feel too tired to care, it's not time to scroll through social media, it is time to sleep. And in that sleep, you will automatically begin to restore your heart. As you wake, embrace tranquility, and your direction in life and balance will automatically become clearer. So your homework, if you choose to accept it, is to check in with yourself. Scan your body from top to bottom and feel for emotions that are associated with blockages in the body. Feel your heart rate and blood circulation. Feel where it is blocked and where it can flow. And see in a state of stillness, not of micromanagement, not in trying to mine the body for negative emotions, not in trying to dig through or prod too much, but in that state of stillness and observation, of observing without trying to control. You'll naturally fall into a sacred rhythm. And that's the rhythm that's going to carry you back to yourself and back to your healing and your thriving. See, I don't know if you should have six-pack abs. I don't know if you want that. I don't know if you want to run 20 miles, but your body does. Your body has ambition. Your body wants to stretch and move and flourish because it's part of you. And just as your mind loves to be fed by great ideas, loves to get into books and new information, your legs want to jump and pull and pivot and move. Your body wants to sweat. Your lungs want to open. And in that opening, your kidneys want to dilate. Your body wants and deserves more movement than it may be getting, or more sleep than it's getting. But I don't know that, and I can't know that, and nobody else can know that. Only your body can tell you that. Now, when it comes to trauma and intergenerational trauma, herbs appear to be able to help. There's a recent article I saw. It's from 2022, and it's on cinnamaldehyde. And it's that cinnamaldehyde, which is an aldehyde in cinnamon, prevents intergenerational effects of paternal depression in mice via regulating GR/MIR190B BDNF pathway. So they made mice very sad. Their children, their grandchildren get sad too. And this has to do with sex hormones, and it has to do with cortisol, and it has to do with what you expect in life. And they found that cinnamaldehyde is a potential intervening agent for intergenerational inheritance of depression, probably through regulation of this pathway. Now, cinnamon is used in herbal formulas which affect fear in the body. Formulas like Jingwei Shenqi, formulas like Jiao Taiwan, which also has an effect on orexins. Now, orexins tell you when you should be sleeping, when you should be eating. It has to do with your rhythms. And one of the ways that it functions is through the heart and kidney and getting you back in touch with that sacred rhythm. The best way to approach this, whether you are a practitioner or a patient, and especially if you're a practitioner, is to find a Chinese medicine doctor and get treatment that is customized just for you. Check in with yourself, listen to your body, not like I'm going to listen to my body a little bit while I listen to music. No, do the work. You're worth it. You are worth the work of lying down and checking in. Because this isn't just about you, okay? You've got trillions of cells. You have microbiota. There is a lot of life that you are responsible for. And you also need to remember that when you take care of yourself and when you thrive and when you give yourself and others permission to thrive, we do. When I know that you are at your best, living a happy life, thriving in this way, it gives me permission to do the same. Now, this sounds hokey, I know. As I'm saying it, I'm hearing it, but I have an old friend and he told me, you've been putting a lot into students and you've had a lot of hope for them. I said, yeah. He said, why don't you take that for the next 2 months and just put it into yourself? Really coach yourself and guide yourself like you would students. Treat yourself like your growth and development is that important. As important as what you're giving toward other people. I said, okay, and I started to do that. And it wasn't easy, and it hasn't been perfect. But as I have started to improve my own health, as I have started to care more about myself, naturally and incidentally, people who I love are starting to take care of themselves more too. We're all connected this way. So I would ask for yourself, for your trillions of cells, and for everyone you love, please take the time to check in with yourself. You are worth it. And when you are at your best, it makes all of us have a happier and healthier life. Thank you so much for listening to the Botanical Biohacking Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Andrew Miles.